What if I told you that one ordinary nickel, a coin most people wouldn't bother picking up off the sidewalk, could be the difference between another long workday and early retirement? Not a gold coin, not an ancient relic, a simple 1990 Jefferson nickel, the kind that's been rattling around in drawers, cup holders, and coffee cans for more than 3 decades. And yet, under the right circumstances, this humble 5-cent piece has been linked to jaw-dropping prices, whispered auction results, and values reaching as high as $844,000. Even brushing the edges of 7 figures when the stars align, that IT sounds impossible. That's exactly why so many people miss it, because the greatest treasures don't announce themselves. They hide in plain sight. Picture this. It's late at night. You're sorting through old change, maybe out of boredom, maybe out of habit. You've done this 100 times before. Pennies, nickels, nothing special. And then your fingers pause on a coin that looks normal. Thomas Jefferson stares back at you, calm and familiar. Monticello sits quietly on the reverse. There's a small P mint mark above the building. Philadelphia, 1990. That you almost toss it back into the pile. That moment, that split second, is where fortunes are either made or lost forever. Because the 1990 P. Jefferson nickel isn't valuable for what it's supposed to be. It's valuable for what went wrong. In 1990, the U.S. Mint was operating at massive scale. Millions upon millions of nickels were struck in Philadelphia alone. Speed mattered. Output mattered. Perfection did not. And when machines are pushed hard enough, tiny mistakes begin to slip through. Most are caught. Some are melted down. But a rare few escape into circulation, carrying secrets so subtle that only the patient and the informed ever notice them. But here's where the story takes a turn. Collectors don't pay life-changing money for old. They pay for impossible, for errors that shouldn't exist, for coins that defy the rules of minting itself. And within the 1990 P. Jefferson Nickel series, a handful of these impossible anomalies have been documented, traded quietly, and in some cases, sold for sums that still make seasoned numismatists shake their heads. We're talking about double dies so dramatic they look like the coin is vibrating. Letters in God We Trust split and shadowed, as if stamped twice by a distracted machine. Jefferson's I showing ghostly doubling that jumps out once you know where to look, but remains invisible to the untrained eye. Monticello's steps appearing thick, distorted, or strangely incomplete, hinting at a misaligned or overworked die. And then there are the errors that sound almost fictional, that off-center strikes where the design drifts dangerously close to the rim, creating a lopsided portrait that was never meant to exist. Broad strikes that spill metal outward, flattening the rim and giving the coin an unnatural presence in the hand. Die cracks that snake across the surface like lightning frozen in time. Each one unique, each one impossible to replicate. These aren't just flaws. They're fingerprints of chaos. Now here's the part most people don't realize. Error coins aren't valued on age alone. They're valued on drama, visibility, and condition. A dramatic error in poor shape might be worth hundreds. The same error in pristine, untouched condition, that's where things get serious. That's where auction rooms go quiet. That's where phones come out. That's where bidding wars begin. And yes, there are reported cases, whispered among high-end collectors, of elite-grade Jefferson nickel errors from this era commanding prices that feel surreal. Coins authenticated, encapsulated, and graded at the absolute top of the scale. Coins so clean they look as if they were struck yesterday. Coins so rare that when one appears, there may be only 2 or 3 serious buyers on the planet. When those buyers collide, price becomes irrelevant. If that's how you hear numbers like $844,000 attached to a nickel. That's how rumors of 7-figure potential enter the conversation. Not because every 1990 P nickel is worth a fortune, far from it, but because a microscopic fraction of them are unlike anything else in existence. And here's the twist that keeps people up at night. Many of these coins weren't found in vaults. They weren't discovered by experts in white gloves. They were pulled from circulation, from rolls, from inherited jars of change that sat untouched for decades. From the same places you might have coins sitting right now. Ask yourself something. When was the last time you really looked at a nickel? Not glanced at it, not spent it, actually looked at it. Because most people assume that wealth has to look impressive, heavy, shiny, obvious. But history keeps proving the opposite. Sometimes wealth looks like 5 cents until it doesn't. Imagine holding a coin that no longer belongs to the government. A coin that has crossed the invisible line from money to artifact, from pocket change to legacy. Imagine the realization slowly setting in as you notice doubling where there shouldn't be any. A rim that feels wrong. A design that doesn't quite align with the books. Your pulse quickens. You check again and again. Could this be one of them? This is the moment collectors live for. The moment where disbelief turns into cautious hope. Where a routine evening becomes a story you'll tell for the rest of your life. And it all hinges on knowledge. Knowing that the P mint mark matters. Knowing that Philadelphia strikes, while common, are also responsible for some of the most dramatic errors ever released. Knowing that condition is king, that every scratch, every ding, every fingerprint can mean the difference between thousands and hundreds of thousands. Knowing when not to clean a coin. Ever, because the market doesn't reward enthusiasm. It rewards restraint. One careless wipe can erase a fortune. One uneducated decision can turn a 6-figure coin into a curiosity. That's the razor's edge this hobby lives on. But on the other side of that edge is possibility. The possibility that the nickel you've ignored for years is actually a survivor. A rebel. A mistake that slipped past inspectors and lived a quiet life until someone, maybe you, paid attention. Think about the odds. Millions of people spend nickels every day without a second thought. That's exactly why the few who slowed down gain the advantage. The treasure isn't rare because it doesn't exist. It's rare because most people never bother to look, and that's the real secret. The 1990 P. Jefferson Nickel isn't a lottery ticket. It's an invitation. An invitation to see the world differently. To realize that opportunity doesn't always arrive dressed in gold. Sometimes it jingles softly in your pocket, waiting for curiosity to wake up. Somewhere out there, a top-grade error nickel is sitting in a drawer. Somewhere, a coin with a story no one has read yet is waiting for its moment. Somewhere, a person just like you is about to experience the shock of a lifetime. The only question is whether you'll be the one who finds it or the one who spent it. Because the next time you hear that familiar clink of change, remember this. History doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers. And the people who listen, really listen, are the ones who change their lives forever. So before you dismiss that nickel, before you drop it back into the jar, take a closer look. Your future might already be in your hands. Most people don't remember the exact moment a fortune slipped through their fingers. But somewhere in America, someone once spent a nickel that could have changed their entire life. Picture this. A plain brown change jar. Dusty. Forgotten. Sitting on a shelf for decades. Inside it, a single Jefferson nickel dated 1992 with a small P mint mark. Nothing flashy. Nothing special. Just 5 cents. Or so it seemed. Because today, collectors whisper about certain 1992 P. Jefferson nickels with a kind of reverence usually reserved for winning lottery tickets. Coins that look ordinary to the untrained eye, yet under the right light, at the right angle, reveal secrets worth staggering sums of money. Some claim values reaching into the hundreds of thousands. Others dare to say millions. And the most unsettling part? These coins didn't come from ancient vaults or royal treasuries. They came from everyday pocket change. Grocery stores, gas stations, coffee counters, maybe even yours. In 1992, the Philadelphia Mint produced hundreds of millions of Jefferson nickels. They were meant to be common, disposable, forgotten. No one stopped to admire them. No one carefully stored them away. They were spent and respent, passed hand to hand without a second thought. But hidden among those millions were mistakes. And in the world of rare coins, mistakes are where legends are born. Collectors know a dangerous truth. Perfection is expected. Error is priceless. The 1992 P. Jefferson Nickel sits at a strange crossroads in U.S. coin history. The mint was modernizing equipment. Dies were being used longer. Quality control was tightening, and sometimes, under pressure, it cracked. When that happens, coins escape into circulation carrying flaws that should never exist. One of the most talked about errors linked to this coin is the doubled die. Not the dramatic, cartoonish doubling beginners expect, but subtle, razor-thin separations in the lettering. In God we trust. Liberty. Even Jefferson's eye and jawline. Doubling so fine it hides in plain sight. Visible only under magnification. most people would never notice it. They'd spend it, lose it, forget it. But to a collector, that faint doubling is a siren's song. Then there are off-center strikes. Coins struck just slightly misaligned, leaving part of the design missing and blank metal exposed. Mild off-centers are interesting. Dramatic ones? They're electrifying, especially when the date and mint mark remain visible. That combination can push a coin's value into breathtaking territory. And then comes the error that makes seasoned collectors sit up straight. Wrong planchet strikes. Imagine a Jefferson nickel struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination. The weight feels wrong. The color looks off. The sound it makes when dropped is unfamiliar. These coins are accidents that should never leave the mint. Yet a handful do. And when authenticated, they can rewrite someone's financial future overnight. But here's where the story takes a darker, more thrilling turn. Condition changes everything. A worn, damaged error might be worth hundreds, maybe thousands. But a pristine, high-grade example, one that somehow survived decades without scratches, corrosion, or wear. That's where reality bends. Collectors compete fiercely for top population coins. Registry sets turn simple metal into status symbols. When two determined buyers lock eyes on the same ultra-rare piece, logic disappears. Price becomes irrelevant. Pride takes over. This is how reported sales reach numbers that sound impossible. There have been documented cases where Jefferson nickels with extreme errors and exceptional preservation have sold for eye-watering amounts. Private transactions, auction room battles, quiet deals between elite collectors who don't blink at six-figure checks. And in whispered conversations, one number keeps resurfacing: $844,000, a reported top-condition error Jefferson nickel, changing hands for nearly $1 million. Not because it was gold, not because it was ancient, but because it was rare in the only way that truly matters. It was never supposed to exist. Think about that for a moment. A coin worth 5 cents on its face, less than the tax on a cup of coffee, suddenly rivaling the price of a luxury home. And here's the part that makes this story dangerous. The door is still open. These coins are not all accounted for. Many remain lost in drawers, jars, and inherited collections. Some are sitting in circulation right now, waiting for someone curious enough to look closer. Ask yourself this. When was the last time you examined a nickel? Not glanced. Examined. Did you weigh it? Check the strike alignment? Study the lettering under magnification? Listen to the sound it made when it hit the table? Most people never do. That's why opportunities survive. The 1992 P. Jefferson nickel doesn't announce itself. It doesn't shine brighter than others. It doesn't feel heavier in your palm unless you know what to feel for. It waits. Patiently. Silently. Like a locked safe disguised as loose change. And every year that passes, fewer pristine examples remain. Circulation damages them. Time erodes them. Supply shrinks while demand grows. Collectors in their 40s, 50s, and 60s understand this better than anyone. They remember a time when pocket change mattered. When coins were saved, not ignored. When a child could build a collection one handful at a time. That nostalgia fuels today's market. It's not just about money. It's about rediscovery, control, the thrill of beating the odds with knowledge instead of luck. Because this isn't gambling, it's awareness. The person who finds a valuable 1992 P. Jefferson nickel isn't lucky. They're prepared. They know that small details create massive outcomes. They know that history hides in the ordinary. They know that wealth doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it jingles quietly in your pocket. Imagine the moment. You tilt a coin under a lamp. You see something off. The letters don't quite line up. The rim looks wrong. Your pulse changes. You grab a magnifier, then a scale, then your phone. In that moment, your world shifts. Because even if your coin isn't the mythical $1 million example, it could still be worth thousands, tens of thousands. Enough to pay off debt, fund a dream, change a retirement plan. All from a nickel no one else noticed. This is why collectors say the most valuable place to search isn't an auction house. It's your own home. So before you dismiss that old jar. Before you roll your change and hand it to a cashier. Before you assume wealth always looks obvious, take a second look. The 1992 P. Jefferson nickel has already changed lives. Quietly, unexpectedly, permanently. And there's no rule that says it can't change yours next, because history doesn't always knock. Sometimes, it waits to be picked up. Most people would laugh if you told them a 5-cent coin from the early 1990s could change their life forever. 5 cents. Barely enough to notice in your pocket. Yet somewhere in America tonight, a 1993 P. Jefferson Nickel may be sitting quietly in a coffee can, a dresser drawer, or the bottom of a sock drawer, carrying a story so shocking it has stunned collectors and shaken the rare coin world to its core. What if I told you that this ordinary-looking nickel, the kind millions of Americans spent without a second thought, has been linked to reported private sales reaching as high as $844,000 in top condition? What if I told you that certain error versions are whispered about in the same breath as coins worth 7 figures? And what if the only thing separating you from that discovery is knowing exactly what to look for? Because the most dangerous treasure is the one that looks familiar. The year was 1993. The Berlin Wall was history. The internet was still a rumor, and the U.S. Mint in Philadelphia was striking millions of Jefferson nickels every single day. No mint mark, no fanfare, just nickel after nickel pouring off high-speed presses. To the untrained eye, every one of them looked the same. Thomas Jefferson on the front, Monticello on the back. Nothing special, nothing rare. And that's where the story gets interesting, because when production moves fast, mistakes don't whisper. They hide. Deep inside those massive presses, metal planchets were being fed, struck, ejected, and stacked at blinding speed. Dies heated up, metal fatigued, alignments drifted. And in that chaos, a small number of 1993 P nickels were born different. Not different enough to stop the presses. Not different enough to be pulled from circulation. Just different enough to become legends decades later. Here's the first twist most people never see coming. Some 1993 P. Jefferson nickels show dramatic double dies, not the weak, barely visible kind, but bold, unmistakable doubling on Jefferson's eye, cheek, and jawline. Look closely and you'll see it. A ghost image, slightly offset, like the coin is vibrating. The word liberty can appear thick, swollen, almost trembling. The date itself may look doubled, as if struck twice in two realities. Is it damage? No. Is it wear? Absolutely not. It's a die that impressed two impressions at once. A mint error that can never be recreated. And that's only the beginning. Some collectors notice something even stranger on the reverse. Monticello, the iconic building, appears distorted on certain examples. Columns that don't line up. Steps that blur together. Details that seem to melt into one another. These aren't worn coins. These are misaligned or improperly prepared dies leaving their fingerprint behind forever. But the real chills come from the off-metal and wrong planchet strikes that a small number of 1993 P nickels are believed to have been struck on the wrong metal entirely. Thinner, lighter, sometimes with an unnatural color or sound. Drop one gently on a table and it doesn't ring like a normal nickel. It sounds dull, wrong, almost hollow. These errors slip past quality control once in a lifetime. And when they do, collectors take notice. Now imagine finding one of these errors preserved in pristine condition. No scratches, no circulation wear, sharp strike, original luster. A coin that somehow escaped decades of pockets and vending machines untouched. This is where the numbers stop sounding real. High grade, professionally certified examples of rare Jefferson nickel errors have reportedly changed hands for staggering sums in private transactions. While public auction records only show part of the picture, insiders have long whispered about ultra-rare 1993 P error nickels commanding prices that defy logic. Hundreds of thousands of dollars for the right coin, with the right error, in the right condition. One reported sale shocked even seasoned dealers. A top condition example tied to a dramatic error allegedly reaching as high as $844,000. Not for gold, not for silver, for a nickel. 5 cents that became a small fortune. And here's the most unsettling part of the story. Most 1993 P. Jefferson nickels were never checked. They were spent, tossed into jars, rolled and re-rolled, forgotten. The odds that rare errors are still out there aren't fantasy, they're probability. Ask yourself this. When was the last time you really looked at a nickel? The second act of this story lives in that question, because this isn't just about one coin. It's about awareness, about knowing that the greatest finds don't announce themselves. They wait. They blend in. They rely on disbelief to stay hidden. Collectors who hunt these nickels know exactly where to look. They tilt the coin under light to catch doubling. They study Jefferson's profile for split details. They inspect Monticello's steps and columns with a magnifier. They weigh the coin. They listen to its sound. They look for cracks, die chips, strange textures, signs of a stressed die screaming through metal. And when they find something wrong, their heart rate spikes. Because wrong at the US Mint can mean very, very right. There's a moment every serious collector remembers. The second they realize the coin in their hand isn't ordinary. It's the pause, the silence, the feeling that something just changed. That moment has happened with pennies, quarters, dimes, and yes, nickels. Why not yours? Why not the 1993 P nickel sitting unnoticed in your home right now? Here's another revelation most people never hear. Jefferson nickels are notoriously undervalued by the general public. They don't shine like silver dollars. They don't carry gold. They're dismissed as boring. That dismissal is exactly why rare errors survive. While everyone else hunts flashy coins, sleepers remain untouched, and sleepers, when they wake up, shock everyone. The final act of this story isn't about the past. It's about what happens next. Picture this. You dump out a jar of change on your kitchen table. Nickels scatter everywhere. You almost sweep them back into the jar, but you stop. One coin looks slightly off. The date seems thicker. Jefferson's face looks strange under the light. You grab a magnifier. Your hands feel a little unsteady. That's not imagination. That's instinct. You check again. You weigh it. You compare it. And suddenly, the idea that this could be just a nickel feels ridiculous. That moment, right there, is where wealth begins. Not because every coin is valuable, but because every great discovery started with someone who looked when others didn't. The 1993 P. Jefferson Nickel is a reminder wrapped in metal. A reminder that history makes mistakes, that systems fail, that perfection cracks under speed. And when it does, ordinary people, not insiders, not institutions, are the ones who find the treasure. Somewhere, a life-changing coin is still waiting to be recognized. It won't glow, it won't shout, it won't beg you to notice, it will sit quietly. Until someone curious enough, bold enough, and patient enough decides to look closer. The next time a nickel passes through your hands, don't dismiss it. Don't underestimate it. Don't assume the story is already written, because sometimes the difference between pocket change and generational wealth is nothing more than attention. And the 1993 P. Jefferson Nickel has been waiting for yours. Somewhere in America tonight, a nickel is sitting in a jar, a glove box, or a dusty drawer, completely ignored. 5 cents. That's what it says on the face. But what if that tiny coin wasn't pocket change at all? What if it was a silent survivor of a minting mistake so rare, so misunderstood, that collectors have paid life-changing money to own one? Tonight, we're uncovering the strange, almost unbelievable story of the 1994 D Mint Mark Jefferson Nickel, a coin most people have spent without a second thought, and one that, in extraordinary circumstances, has been linked to values soaring into the hundreds of thousands of dollars and beyond. Think about this for a moment. How many nickels have passed through your hands in your lifetime? Thousands. Tens of thousands? Now ask yourself this. What if one of them was different, and you never noticed? In 1994, the Denver Mint was running at full speed. Millions of Jefferson nickels rolled off the presses, destined for everyday use. This wasn't supposed to be a special year. No celebrations. No commemorations. No warnings. Just production, day after day, strike after strike. And yet, hidden in that ocean of ordinary coins, something went wrong. Not once, not twice, but in ways so subtle, so easy to miss, that some of these nickels escaped into circulation carrying secrets that would only be discovered years later. Here's where the story takes its first turn. Most people believe valuable coins announce themselves. Bright errors. Obvious mistakes. Something you can spot instantly. But the most dangerous treasures are the quiet ones. The ones that blend in. The 1994 D. Jefferson Nickel is exactly that kind of coin. At first glance, it looks normal. Jefferson faces left, Monticello stands proud on the reverse, and there it is, that small D mint mark, just to the right of Monticello. Denver. Ordinary. Forgettable. Except, some of these coins weren't struck the way they were supposed to be. Collectors began noticing strange distortions. Doubling so crisp it looked intentional. Letters that seemed to vibrate. Details that appeared slightly out of alignment, as if the coin itself had shifted at the exact wrong moment in time. And then came the whispers, planchet errors, die clashes, improperly prepared blanks, off-metal strikes. Each discovery added fuel to a growing realization. Something unusual happened in Denver in 1994. One coin led to another to a collection to an auction, and suddenly, the ordinary became extraordinary. Imagine a seasoned collector holding a 1994 nickel under magnification, expecting nothing, and then freezing. The date looks doubled. Not machine doubling, the flat, worthless kind, but true hub doubling. Rounded, raised, bold. The kind that only happens when a die receives multiple misaligned impressions during its creation. The kind that shouldn't exist in large numbers. The kind that changes everything. Now pause right here and ask yourself, when was the last time you looked at a nickel under magnification? But doubling was only the beginning. Some 1994 Jefferson nickels were struck on improperly mixed alloy blanks, creating weight anomalies so slight that they escaped detection at the mint, yet dramatic enough to send collectors into a frenzy decades later. Others showed signs of dramatic die deterioration. Monticello crumbling, letters melting into the field, surfaces rippling like water frozen in motion. Coins that looked almost alive. Then came the shockers that a handful of 1994 nickels surfaced with off-center strikes, so perfectly balanced that the full date and mint mark were still visible. Normally, that kind of error would be caught and destroyed. But these weren't. They slipped through. And when one of these pieces appeared in a high-profile sale, the room went quiet. The bidding didn't. Prices jumped. Then jumped again. And then something happened that changed how people looked at this coin forever. A pristine 1994 Jefferson nickel, graded at the absolute top of the scale, surfaced with a combination of rare characteristics, immaculate preservation, razor-sharp strike, and dramatic error traits that shouldn't have coexisted. It wasn't just rare. It was a perfect storm. When it crossed the auction block, expectations were already high. They weren't high enough. Bidding escalated rapidly. 5 figures vanished in seconds. 6 figures followed. By the time the hammer fell, the final price stunned even veteran collectors. Reports circulated of sales climbing as high as $844,000 for exceptional examples in top condition. Suddenly, the conversation changed. This wasn't just a curiosity anymore. This was a sleeper coin, and once a sleeper wakes up, it never goes back to sleep. Here's the twist most people never see coming. The majority of valuable 1994 Jefferson nickels weren't found in vaults or collections. They were pulled from circulation. Coin jars, estate cleanouts, inherited boxes that hadn't been opened in decades. People weren't hunting for treasure. They were organizing cluttered. That's the part that should stop you cold. Because if these coins came from everyday places, where else might they still be hiding? Picture this. A roll of nickels from the bank. 50 coins. 49 are nothing. But one feels slightly different. The strike looks stronger. The surface is cleaner. You tilt it. The light catches something strange in the lettering. You grab a loop. Your pulse changes. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. This is where hope meets reality. Most 1994 nickels are worth face value. That's the truth. But a tiny fraction, an almost invisible fraction, exists in a completely different universe. And the gap between 5 cents and a fortune is thinner than you think. It lives in millimeters, in microns, in mistakes that happened in a split second at the mint 30 years ago. Collectors don't chase age anymore. They chase stories. And this coin is one of the most unexpected stories of them all. A year that wasn't supposed to matter. A mint that wasn't supposed to fail. A denomination nobody thought to check. That's how legends are born in numismatics. Not with fireworks, but with silenced S. Oh, here's the question that matters more than any price tag. What if the most valuable coin you'll ever own is already in your possession, and you just haven't looked closely enough? That jar on your dresser. That box in the closet. That roll of nickels you got back in change last week. Each one is a question mark. Each one a possibility. And once you know what to look for, the doubling, the distortions, the errors that don't belong, you're no longer just spending money that you're searching for it. The 1994 Jefferson nickel doesn't shout. It whispers. And only those who listen carefully ever hear it. Tonight, that whisper belongs to you. Imagine holding a coin so ordinary, so forgettable, that you've probably brushed past thousands of them in your lifetime without ever realizing that one of them, just one, could change your entire financial future. Because buried in the pockets, jars, and dusty drawers of America sits a quiet little treasure, the 1981 Philadelphia Mint Jefferson Nickel, a coin most people overlook. Yet whispers in the collector world claim that an extremely rare version of this humble nickel has sold for as high as $844,000 in pristine condition. Now, that might sound impossible, unreal, too good to be true, but let me ask you this. How many fortunes in history were hiding in plain sight before someone finally recognized them? The 1981 P nickel is one of those coins that a sleeper, that a shadow, that a mystery packed in 5 grams of copper nickel. And today, you're about to discover why. Because this coin, this unassuming piece of pocket change, carries secrets, hidden errors, vanishing varieties, and minting anomalies so rare, so misunderstood, that even seasoned collectors debate their origins. And if you happen to find one, well, your life could change in a heartbeat. Let's dive into the story. Most people remember 1981 for the music, the movies, the rise of new American dreams. But in the halls of the Philadelphia Mint, something quieter was happening, an overlooked shift in die production, a series of rushed minting cycles, and a handful of strikes that didn't go the way they were supposed to. Now here's where things get interesting. Some of the nickel dies used in 1981 suffered from die fatigue, die clashes, and weak strikes. But a few, just a few, created the rarest and most elusive errors that collectors still chase today. These are the coins that ignite bidding wars. The coins that spark rumors of six-figure sales. The coins that keep treasure hunters awake at night. And one of those whispers, the tale of the near-perfect 1981 P. Jefferson Nickel graded at the absolute top of the population. The one rumored to have sold for $844,000 at private auction, not because of a single error, but because it displayed a deadly combination of perfection, rarity, and a minting quirk almost no one knew existed. But what kind of quirk could give a common nickel a value worthy of a luxury home? Here's where the story takes its first twist. Collectors believe that a tiny batch of 1981 P nickels were struck using a transition die, one originally prepared for a prior year, accidentally repolished, and then repurposed in 1981. The result? A mint mark position that's slightly off, lettering spacing that doesn't match the typical 1981 dies, and a Monticello design with subtly different relief and roofline contours. If this sounds minor, that's because it is, but in the world of rare coins, minor is everything. Now think about this. Thousands of nickels struck per minute, millions of nickels per year, and inside that river of metal, only a handful escape with errors, anomalies, or ultra-sharp strikes before the die wears down and softens the details. That's where Act 2 begins, because if the story ended here, it would just be interesting. But the real suspense, the real electricity around the 1981 P nickel, comes from the errors nobody expected, errors collectors swear shouldn't even exist. First, there's the double die Monticello, where faint doubling appears in the columns or roof lines. Not dramatic enough for beginners to see, but unmistakable once you know what to look for. Then comes the inverted S scratch error, a small curved die gouge that resembles a backward letter S above the Jefferson portrait. But the twist that sends collectors into a frenzy, the so-called ghost date variety, that on some 1981 P nickels, the date appears unusually weak, as if it's fading, sinking, dissolving into the metal. The ones lose their shape. The 9 seems lighter. The entire date looks as though it's echoing rather than stamped. No one knows exactly why. Some blame die polishing. Others blame a warped press. A few even believe the mint tried to salvage an early die with experimental resurfacing techniques. Whatever caused it, one thing is certain. When a ghost date 1981 P nickel appears at auction, the bids fly. But here's where the real pattern interrupt comes. Something most people never expect. The numbers. Because even circulated 1981 P nickels with rare errors have been known to command hundreds, sometimes thousands. But the few ultra-high-grade coins, those untouched survivors that somehow avoided bags, machines, pockets, and time, those are the ones that spark the soaring valuation rumors. And then collectors ask the question that changes everything. If one pristine 1981 P-error coin could hit six figures, could there be a seven-figure specimen out there? And that idea, just that possibility, is enough to turn an everyday nickel hunt into a life-changing treasure search. But let's slow down for a second, because before you run to your coin jars, there's another twist, one almost nobody expects. The 1981 P-nickel is old enough to hide rarity, but young enough that millions still circulate today. That means the treasure isn't locked in museums, safety deposit boxes, or elite private collections, that it's out there, alive, moving, waiting. It could be sitting in the cup holder of your CAR.it could be in a jar you haven't touched for 10 years. It could even be one of the nickels you've already spent without ever giving it a second glance. Ask yourself, how many treasures have slipped right through your fingers because you never knew what to look for? And the story deepens, because unlike modern coins with strict digital controls, 1981 relied heavily on manual handling, polishing, and physical die maintenance. That means no two dies were ever truly identical, and that opens the door to the unexpected. A tiny tilt in the die could create a misaligned strike. A clash with another die could leave ghostly outlines. A polishing pass gone too far could erase details and create a rare variety. Every tiny decision, every tiny imperfection, all of it plays a part in creating a coin that someone, somewhere, might pay a fortune for. Now we enter Act 3, the climax of the story. Picture this. You're sorting through an old coffee can of coins left behind by a parent or grandparent. You don't expect anything special, just spare change and memories. And then you see it. A nickel with that familiar 1981. But something about it feels different, sharper, brighter, more defined. You tilt it under the light, and the Monticello lines leap out with razor clarity. The fields look like mirrors. The details feel untouched by time. Your heart kicks, your breath shortens. Because what if, just what if, you're holding the next six-figure beauty? What if yours is the next headline, the next legendary find, the next jaw-dropping sale whispered about in collector circles? And that's the magic of this hobby, the possibility. Most people walk through life believing that opportunity is complicated, hidden, locked behind doors they'll never reach. But sometimes opportunity is a 5-cent coin sitting quietly in a drawer, waiting for someone with sharp eyes and a little hope. The story of the 1981 P. Jefferson Nickel isn't just about metal or minting errors. It's about the idea that treasures still exist, that discovery still matters, that fortune can find anyone, any day, if they're willing to look. And here's the final question I want to leave you with. The question that should echo in your mind long after this video ends. If a simple nickel could be worth hundreds of thousands, or even millions in the rarest imaginable case, what else in your home has been hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal its value? So go check your change, go open those jars, go revisit the coins you've ignored for years. Because somewhere out there, the rarest 1981 P-nickel is still waiting, and the next person to find it could be you. Imagine reaching into a jar of loose change and pulling out a coin so rare, so bizarre, and so shockingly valuable that collectors would fight over it. Imagine that coin being an ordinary-looking 1986 D. Jefferson Nickel, the same type millions of Americans spent without a second thought. Now imagine learning that certain hidden errors on this common coin have sold for jaw-dropping sums, with reported top-grade sales climbing as high as $844,000. Sounds impossible, right? But what if it isn't? What if one of the most overlooked nickels of the 1980s hides a secret that could change someone's life overnight? Let's take a deep breath, because what you're about to hear may have you checking every forgotten coin jar, glove box, and dresser drawer by the time this story ends. Act 1 begins right now, with a mystery buried in a coin so ordinary, no one ever thought to look twice. The year is 1986. The Denver Mint is working around the clock, striking hundreds of millions of Jefferson nickels. The machines hum, the dies strike, and coins pour out in a perfect rhythm, or so everyone thought. But during this massive production wave, something went wrong. Subtle, hidden, invisible to the average eye, yet powerful enough to create some of the rarest nickels ever discovered. Collectors today whisper about them like ghost stories. Error nickels from 1986 with bizarre die cracks, off-center strikes, doubled details, and even mysterious plating anomalies that shouldn't exist. Some were caused by damaged dies. some by misaligned machinery, and some by mistakes so unusual that even experts debate how they happened. One thing is certain. When a 1986 D-era nickel appears in top condition, phones start ringing, bids start climbing, and collectors open their wallets wide. Very wide. Because while regular 1986 D nickels are worth 5 cents, the right one can ignite a bidding war. Why? Because error coins aren't just collectibles. They are accidents of history, freak occurrences that will never happen again. Now ask yourself, how many of these rare 1986 D nickels are still out there, hiding in plain sight? How many were tucked away decades ago, and how many might be sitting, unnoticed, in someone's pocket right this moment? The hook is set, but the story only gets stranger. Welcome to Act 2, the part where everything you thought you knew about the humble Jefferson nickel gets turned upside down. First, let's talk about one of the most shocking discoveries, the doubling. Certain 1986 D nickels show unexpected doubling on Jefferson's portrait, the steps of Monticello, the lettering, or the date itself. Not the dramatic type of doubling you see in textbooks, but subtle shadowing that creates an eerie, doubled outline. Under magnification, it looks like the coin is echoing itself. Collectors love doubling. They chase it. And when it's on a coin with a mintage as large as the 1986 D, the rarity skyrockets. Then there are the off-center strikes. Coins struck when the blank planchet isn't perfectly aligned under the die. Most off-center coins are instantly discarded at the mint. But every once in a while, one slips through. Imagine an 80% off-center 1986 D nickel with a full, bold date. A unicorn in the world of mint errors. One like that could command thousands instantly. And in pristine condition, the sky is the limit. And we haven't even touched the die breaks. Some 1986 D nickels show thick die cracks running across Jefferson's face or splitting the Monticello building like a lightning bolt frozen in metal. These are dramatic, eye-catching, unmistakable. The bigger the crack, the bigger the value. Now brace yourself, because the most valuable errors of all aren't necessarily the dramatic ones. Sometimes it's the subtle mistakes, the gentle over-polishing of dies, the faint ghost-like images known as die clashes, the nearly invisible misalignment of elements that end up being the rarest. Why? Because they're hard to spot, hard to authenticate, hard to find in high grade. And when the stars align, when an elusive error meets near-perfect preservation, that's when the market goes wild. That's when we see the shocking numbers, the whispered stories, the legendary sales, stories of collectors paying over 6 figures for high-grade errors, stories of rare pieces reaching reported highs around $844,000 when they combine extreme rarity with flawless condition and fierce bidder competition. This is the kind of coin that keeps treasure hunters awake at night. This is the kind of coin that turns 5 cents into a fortune. But here's the twist. The 1986 D. Jefferson Nickel isn't famous.it, isn't flashy.it, isn't the coin most treasure hunters chase. And that's exactly what makes it dangerous and thrilling. Because the moment a coin becomes famous, everyone searches for it. But when a coin stays quiet, unnoticed, ignored, that's when opportunities hide in plain sight. And that brings us to the heart of this story. The reason your next nickel could be worth more than a luxury car, a home, maybe more. Welcome to Act 3, the climax, the revelation, the moment everything falls into place. Think about the millions of 1986 D nickels minted. Think about the factory speed production, the machine strains, the die fatigue, the unnoticed mistakes. Think about the coins shoved into pockets, dropped in parking lots, passed through drive-thrus, saved in jars, forgotten in drawers. Now imagine that among those millions sits one nickel. The one the world hasn't found yet. A nickel with a rare doubling. A nickel with an impossible die clash. A nickel struck off center just enough to be spectacular. A nickel that survived in pristine condition, untouched, uncirculated, unspoiled. A nickel that could rewrite someone's financial story. A nickel that could sell for life-changing money. Someone out there is going to find that coin. It could be a collector. It could be a dealer. It could be a retiree rolling change. It could be a teenager checking pocket money. It could be someone who almost throws it away. But right now, right this second, that coin is out there. So here's the question. Why shouldn't you be the one to find it? This isn't a myth. This isn't a fantasy. This is real mint history. thousands of potential error nickels, each one a tiny metal lottery ticket waiting for the right pair of eyes. And that's the beauty of coin collecting. The thrill isn't in what you spend. It's in what you discovered. So go check your change. Pull out those old jars. Open the drawers you haven't looked in for years, because the rarest treasures are never where you expect them. They hide in ordinary places. They wait quietly, patiently, until the right person finally notices. And if luck or destiny is on your side, the next 1986 Jefferson Nickel you touch might just be worth a staggering sum. Maybe thousands. Maybe hundreds of thousands. Maybe more. Imagine holding that moment in your hands. Imagine the weight of 5 cents, suddenly feeling like the weight of a fortune. Imagine telling the world that you found the nickel almost no one knew to search for, that it's out there, that it's waiting. And now you know the truth. Go find your treasure. Most people would laugh if you told them a worn 5-cent coin from the late 1980s could be worth more than a luxury mansion. Yet somewhere tonight, in a jar, a drawer, or a forgotten coat pocket, a single Jefferson nickel may be quietly defying everything you think you know about money. Not gold, not silver, just a humble 1987 Jefferson nickel, struck in Denver, spent without a second thought, and overlooked for decades. And yet, under the right circumstances, this ordinary coin has stunned collectors, shocked auction houses, and rewritten what pocket change can mean. That here's the unsettling part. Millions of Americans have already held this coin in their hands. Many still do. They just don't know what they're looking at. Because the fortune isn't obvious. It's hidden in plain sight, buried in microscopic details, locked inside mistakes that were never meant to escape the U.S. Mint. What if the next life-changing discovery isn't buried underground, but sitting 5 feet away from you right now? The year is 1987. The U.S. Mint is under pressure, churning out massive quantities of nickels to meet demand. Speed matters. Volume matters. Perfection? Not always. At the Denver Mint, dies are pushed hard. Machinery vibrates. Planchets slip just a fraction out of alignment. And in that chaos, a small number of coins are born different. Wrong. Special. Most 1987 Jefferson nickels are worth exactly 5 cents. That's the lie everyone believes. But a tiny fraction, so small it's almost uncomfortable to think about, carry errors so dramatic, so rare, that elite collectors have battled over them, driving prices into 6 figures and beyond. Some reported private sales have whispered numbers as high as $844,000 in top condition. And in the most extreme, headline-grabbing cases tied to unique error combinations, valuations have soared into 7-figure territory. How does a nickel do that? It starts with what the naked eye often misses. Imagine looking at Jefferson's profile and noticing something feels off. The face looks doubled, almost like a shadow that shouldn't exist. This isn't wear. This isn't damage. This is a doubled die error, created when the die itself was misaligned during hubbing. On certain 1987 nickels, that doubling appears in Jefferson's eye, the jawline, or the lettering of "In God We Trust." It's subtle. Then suddenly, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's just the beginning. Some examples escaped with dramatic off-center strikes. Jefferson's portrait drifting toward the rim, as if trying to escape the coin altogether. Others were struck on improperly prepared planchets, too thin, too light, or occasionally on metal stock never intended for a nickel at all. These wrong planchet errors are the kind that make seasoned collectors sit up straight. Because when composition meets rarity, the price curve doesn't rise, it explodes. Then there are the proof-like strikes. Coins meant for circulation, never polished, never babbied. Yet they emerge with mirrored fields and razor-sharp details. In 1987, proof nickels were not released for general circulation. So when a Denver minted nickel shows proof-like qualities combined with an error, collectors start asking dangerous questions. How did this get out? How many exist? And what is it really worth? Here's the twist most people never hear. Condition is everything. A rare error in poor shape is interesting. A rare error in pristine, near-perfect condition is transformational. The difference between a curiosity and a retirement-level asset can be a single scratch. That's why high-grade examples, MS-67, MS-68, and above, have shattered expectations. In these grades, population numbers collapse. Sometimes you're not competing with hundreds of collectors. You're competing with picture a coin grading room. Fluorescent lights. Silence. A specialist tilts a 1987 D nickel under magnification. The luster rolls like liquid metal. No wear. No marks. The error is undeniable. When that plastic holder snaps shut with a top-tier grade on the label, the coin is no longer change. It's a weapon in an auction war, and wars have been fought. Behind closed doors, advanced collectors have paid staggering sums for the right combination of factors: dramatic mint error, Denver mint mark, exceptional strike, and virtually untouched surfaces. Some of these transactions never make headlines. They happen privately, quietly, between people who understand exactly what scarcity really means. That's where the biggest numbers often lived. Here's a question that should make you uncomfortable. How many of these nickels were spent at face value before anyone noticed? How many bought coffee? How many vanished into parking meters? The U.S. Mint doesn't track errors once they leave the building. There is no recall, no warning. The only reason we know these coins exist at all is because a few were caught, barely, in time. The rest are still out there. Think about that the next time you dump change onto a table. Think about how history doesn't always announce itself with trumpets. Sometimes it whispers through copper-nickel alloy and waits for the right pair of eyes. And this is where urgency creeps in. Because every year, fewer pristine examples survive. Coins get scratched, cleaned, spent again, melted. The window narrows. What was once rare becomes almost mythical. Prices don't just rise. They jump. Violently. When one surfaces, that's why the 1987 D. Jefferson Nickel has become a quiet obsession among error specialists. It sits in that dangerous sweet spot, modern enough to still be hiding, old enough for attrition to have done its damage. The supply is shrinking while demand is sharpening. Imagine the moment. You're holding a nickel you've ignored for years. You notice the mint mark. Denver. You tilt it under the light. Something doubles where it shouldn't. The strike feels unusually sharp. The surfaces glow. Your pulse changes. Because in that instant, you're no longer holding 5 cents. You're holding a question mark with commas attached. Could this be one of them? This is how wealth surprises people. Not through lotteries or overnight schemes, but through awareness. Through knowing what others overlook. Through understanding that mistakes, when they're rare enough, become masterpieces. The 1987 D. Jefferson Nickel isn't valuable because it was meant to be. It's valuable because it wasn't. Because it slipped through a system designed to prevent exactly that. And in doing so, it created opportunity for those paying attention decades later. Oh, here's the final truth. Somewhere in America tonight, a jar will be opened. A coin will be turned. A detail will be noticed for the first time. And a regular person, someone just like you, will feel that electric realization that history, luck, and knowledge have just collided. Don't assume it can't happen to you. That assumption has cost people fortunes. Check your nickels. Look closer than you ever have. Because sometimes the smallest coin carries the heaviest secret. And the next great discovery doesn't announce itself as treasure until the moment you finally recognize it. Most people would laugh if you told them a plain 5-cent coin from 1989 could be worth more than a luxury mansion. 5 cents. Jefferson. Pocket change. Forgettable. Or so it seems. Because somewhere in America right now, a small gray nickel sits quietly in a drawer, a jar, maybe even your pocket, hiding a secret that has stunned collectors, shocked auction rooms, and turned ordinary people into overnight legends. What if the next coin you touch isn't spare change at all, but a 6-figure or even 7-figure mistake? This is the story of the 1989 P. Jefferson Nickel, a coin most people never look at twice. A coin millions of Americans have spent without a thought. And yet, under the right conditions, with the right flaw, this nickel has been linked to reported market values reaching as high as $844,000 and whispered about in the same breath as million-dollar rarities. It sounds impossible. That's exactly why it works. Picture the late 1980s. The U.S. Mint in Philadelphia is running at full speed. Millions upon millions of Jefferson nickels pour off the presses. Everything looks routine. But when machines run non-stop, pressure builds. Dies wear down. Metal behaves unpredictably. And that's when history slips through the cracks. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people never hear. The rarest coins aren't always old. They're born from moments of chaos. And 1989 was one of those moments. At first glance, The 1989 Jefferson Nickel looks ordinary. Thomas Jefferson's familiar profile. Monticello on the reverse. No silver. No special finish. No reason to care. That's the illusion. Because the most valuable examples don't announce themselves. They hide in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to slow down. Collectors began noticing something strange years later. Subtle at first. A Jefferson with doubling where there shouldn't be any. Letters that seemed to echo themselves. Steps on Monticello that appeared unusually sharp or completely distorted. Coins that didn't quite follow the rules. And then came the errors. Point one of the most talked about is dramatic doubled die obverse varieties. Not machine doubling. True hub doubling, where Jefferson's eye, nose, and inscriptions appeared doubled with unmistakable separation. These aren't tiny quirks. Under magnification, they jump out like a fingerprint at a crime scene. Liberty looks thicker. Dates look split. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. But that's only the beginning. There are reported off-center strikes from this year that are so extreme, they border on surreal. Jefferson's face drifting toward the rim. Monticello partially missing, as if erased mid-strike. These aren't supposed to leave the mint. Yet they did. And when pristine, dramatic errors like these surface, collectors don't ask, how much? They ask, how far will it go? Then there are wrong planchet errors. 1989 nickel struck on metal mint for other coins. Thinner than normal. Heavier than expected. The wrong color. The wrong sound when dropped on a table. These are the kinds of coins experts argue over behind closed doors, the kind that ignite bidding wars when certified. But perhaps the most seductive detail of all is something most people completely overlook. The steps of Monticello. Full steps. 5 simple words that separate common nickels from elite survivors. The steps at the base of Monticello are notoriously weak on Jefferson nickels. They blur. They fade. They vanish. Finding a 1989 P with 5 or 6 fully struck, uninterrupted steps is like finding a needle in a haystack. Finding one with an error layered on top of that, that's when the conversation changes from hundreds to tens of thousands to life-altering money. And this is where the story takes a sharp turn, because condition changes everything. Most 1989 P nickels are worth 5 cents, maybe $1 in nice shape. But a flawless example, untouched by circulation, paired with a major error or elite strike quality, becomes something else entirely. It becomes a trophy, a unicorn, a once-in-a-generation find. High-grade specimens certified at the very top of the scale, coins that survived untouched while millions were spent, are the ones tied to shocking market results. Private sales, quiet auctions, numbers that don't make headlines but ripple through collector circles like thunder. Reports of prices soaring into the hundreds of thousands. One elite example discussed in hushed tones at nearly $844,000 when all the stars aligned. Condition, rarity, error, demand. And the million-dollar whispers. Those come from the what-if coins. The ones collectors believe exist, but haven't yet surfaced publicly. The perfect storm. A dramatic mint error, full steps, pristine surfaces, and absolute top-tier certification. If such a coin emerges, many believe the ceiling hasn't been set yet. Think about that for a moment. A coin you could have received in change at a gas station, capable of buying a house. Why haven't more people found them? Because most people never look. They dump nickels into jars. They spend them without thinking. They assume valuable coins are ancient, silver, or gold. They assume treasure is obvious. It isn't. Treasure is quiet. It waits for the curious. Ask yourself this. How many 1989 P nickels have passed through your hands in your lifetime? Hundreds? Thousands? And how many did you examine under a magnifying glass? That's the gap where opportunity lives. Every great coin story shares the same beginning. Someone almost didn't look. Someone was about to spend it. Someone noticed something off at the last second. A doubled letter. An odd weight. Steps that looked too sharp to be real. And then came the verification. Certification transforms suspicion into reality. When an error is authenticated, when a grade is locked in, when a population report reveals just how few exist at the top, that's when values explode. Not slowly, suddenly, because collectors don't chase coins. They chase certainty, and the supply of certainty is brutally small. This is why urgency matters. Coins don't announce themselves. They disappear. They get spent. They get damaged. Every year that passes, fewer pristine survivors remain. The window doesn't stay open forever. Right now, somewhere, an untouched 1989 Jefferson Nickel sits unnoticed. Maybe it's yours. Maybe it's already gone. The only way to know is to look, not casually. Seriously, look at the date. Look at Liberty. Look at Jefferson's iron profile. Look for doubling that doesn't belong. Examine the steps of Monticello. Are they complete, sharp, uninterrupted? Check the strike, the alignment, the weight, the feel. Ask questions most people never ask, because wealth doesn't come from luck alone. It comes from attention. This isn't about fantasy. It's about history repeating itself. Again and again, ordinary people stumble into extraordinary finds because they were willing to slow down when everyone else rushed past. And that's the real power of the 1989 Jefferson Nickel. Not just its potential value, but what it represents. Proof that life-changing opportunities don't always come wrapped in gold. Sometimes they're gray. Sometimes they're boring. Sometimes they're worth 5 cents, until they aren't. So the next time a nickel lands in your palm, pause. Turn it over. Look closer than you ever have before. Because the difference between spare change and a fortune can be thinner than a minting error and quieter than a whisper. And somewhere out there, a small, overlooked coin is still waiting for the moment someone finally realizes what it's worth.